Well, good morning, everybody, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another edition of CGS Live, Houdini version. I think we're up to version 9, or CGS episode 9 for this Houdini stream. As you can see, I've got a brand new setup. I've been furnished with a brand new camera and lighting setup, and yeah, I think it's looking pretty cool. The camera has certainly made a big improvement. Hopefully, audio and everything is all working. Let me know. Let me know if it's not. As always, I appreciate any feedback on that. Today, I thought what we would do. I was really inspired by one of our other mentors' streams, Brian Bentley, who's our head of modeling at CG Spectrum, and he just last week was doing a stream about modeling, procedural modeling in Houdini, and it's well worth checking out. There's a link in the description below, so definitely check that out. He's been modeling this. If I just jump into Houdini, he's been modeling this kind of Buddha character here, and been doing this rock texture on it. So if you want to see how he did that, check out his streams. I believe they're on Wednesdays. That would be Thursdays Australian time, but Wednesdays US. And yeah, it's really cool. I love the brick texture that he's managed to put together here. I think it looks really good. I don't know if any of you guys have seen this stream. Let me know if you have. I thought it was pretty cool, and I'm definitely going to be watching those to learn all of the little tricks that he had done here with the brick texture, or the brick sort of procedural displacement that he's done. We've got this very high resolution model. So Houdini handles this stuff really well. If we have a look, let's just open this up and have a look. We've got, it's not too bad really, 1,868,000 polys. Houdini can, can handle that, so that's fine. Now, Brian mentioned that he didn't want to destroy this model. Because, he doesn't want any bad juju to come from destroying a religious idol. So that's completely fine with me. I thought I might try and do some more interesting things with it. Breaking something up is easy enough, but let's think about other more interesting things that we could do. I thought doing some growth on it. Hey, Audrey, how you going? Welcome back. Did you see Brian's stream? I don't know if you watch those ones, but I really dig what he's doing. Hey John, thanks for joining me. No worries if it's only just for a few minutes. Definitely check out Brian's stream, John. I think you'd really dig what he's doing in there too. The link's below from last week if you haven't seen it. So yeah, he's given me quite a few attributes here that we can work with as well. So I've just been having a bit of a look at those. So we've got this is brick rest, which you can see when I switch to that. So basically what I'm doing is just setting the P position to this brick rest attribute that exists here. And you can see that the normals get a bit funny. The eyes and smile look quite happy, but we just need to recalculate the normals so we can see the result of that. So you can see there. That is just the brick texture over everything. Then we have a look at this one here. We've got this other one called skin rest. You can see again the normals look a bit funny. You can still see the brick normals there, but if you have a look and refacet it, you can see that is just the skin. So there's our happy little fellow before the brick texture. Hey Robert, how's it going? Did you have a good weekend? Check out my new camera, Robert. I've got this fancy new setup. It's got lights. Which way am I pointing? I've got lights and new camera. It's amazing. Thank you, CG Spectrum. So I'm still on my old microphone though. I've got this boom mic above me, but there's a bit of interference on it, so I haven't switched to that yet. So I've still got my old microphone. Just for today, I'll try and work out the boom at some point. I've got this kind of octopus of things behind my monitor holding cameras and lights and microphones. It's very crazy. Moving into the big leagues. Waiting for dailies. Oh yeah, you're at work. You're starting work. Just thank you for stopping by. Hey Rizwan, how's it going? So yeah, I've just been having a look at what attributes I have to play with here. Thanks, Robert. Yeah, it's cool. Crazy. You would be remiss for thinking that it's nighttime here, except for the little sliver of light that's coming through my window. It is the morning here, but the lights don't look so good with the blinds up. All right, so enough jibber jabbering about my setup. Let's have a look at what else we've got. So we've got this mask attribute as well, which is basically the mask between the skin and the brick texture. That's right. Yeah, watch out, pew pew die. Coming for you. So that could be handy as well for doing certain things. It certainly would be handy for shading, if we wanted to do any shading on this. I haven't seen Brian do any shading on this yet, so that might be still to come if he's planning on doing that. I don't know. We could certainly have a look at it too. But I kind of had this idea where I'm not sure how difficult it will be. It will probably be reasonably difficult, but what I'm going to attempt is to do a little bit of a crumbling effect, so not a full destruction, but just a crumbling effect to reveal the bricks behind the skin. So as if this, and I think that was the intention of the model, that this is kind of like stucco or plaster over the top of a brick base. So trying to come up with some sort of system where we can blend to this this brick underneath, and having all these attributes, would will really help us in trying to figure that out. Rizwan, that's no good. I hope you are better. I hope you feel okay now. So let's have a look at what we can do. So this is obviously going to be our starting point. This is the rest position, the skin rest. And then we're going to want to reveal to our original coming in here. So we're going to go from here to here. And, very easily we can just sort of have a look at, how we might start doing that. Have a look in an attribute VOP maybe. Just kind of playing around with different ways of mixing this stuff. So very, very simply, to create a blend shape in Houdini, through an attribute VOP, you can just mix two P positions together. So P, and then to get the second input there, I'm just going to put get attribute P from the second input, and then Robert, you can chat to me about that on Slack. So this input here is the pointer primitive number, so that is going to go into PT num there, and then this is the 2P positions now. So we've got, because they're the same point number, we can mix them together seamlessly. So you can see here that now I can blend between those two P positions. So I've essentially just created a blend, a blend shape or a blend operation there. If you wanted to do that in Vex, incidentally, it's not called mix, it's called lerp. So it's linear interpolation. And basically you feed it two positions. So there's vector lerp here, so vector value 1, vector value 2, and then a float amount. So that would be kind of the same, where you're plugging in... they kind of look like lightsabers, don't they, Rizwan? I mean, you could definitely pick them up and swing them around and make a lightsaber sound as you do it. I'm sure you would, feel the force. So there we go. And looking at the refaceted result, we can see, when we don't have the facet on, you can still see the normals, the original normals from the brick. So it's important to recalculate so that we can see that there. Now what I was thinking I might try to attempt to do is try and isolate this difference here. So, there's obviously a difference in depth from the original skin to the bricks. One thing I was thinking there is perhaps I could create some sort of like VDB difference. So I don't know if this is the best way, but this is kind of what I was thinking. Maybe not do destruction per se, but it could have a light coming from inside, and the old exterior could crumble away. Then the glow could wash out the camera and reveal a new, complete stucco. Wow, that sounds impressive, John. Yeah, totally. I mean, we could definitely try something like that. First of all, I'm going to try and just see what I can do in terms of, what I can make with this model in terms of, the stucco fracturing, and then we could totally do some kind of interior light or even just some other cracks coming through the bricks or something. We do have all these elements, so we've got brick lines as well. If we have a look, so here's the mask, so we can create another color operator, and what's that? Is it brick capital L lines? So we've got that as well, which we could definitely use to maybe we could blast that away, and that would give us the ability to shine light through the cracks. That could be really cool. Totally. So I've turned this into a VDB, and I'll go a little bit higher. It's pretty small. It's sort of within that 1 meter range. So let's have a look at that. 405,000 voxels, still pretty low, but that's okay. So I'm going to take a VDB from there. There's a lot to work with. Yeah, definitely. Lots you could do with it. And, I guess this is kind of... Yeah, no worries, Robert. I'll talk to you later. Thanks for stopping by. So have fun at dailies. Talk to you soon. So yeah, there's definitely a lot to work with, John. And I guess this is kind of typical of, if I was to receive a model like this at work, in a studio, or, if I was working on something at home, somebody sends me a model. It's so great to have all these different attributes. Sometimes you won't get that. You'll just get the model and nothing. And then maybe you have to come up with your own attributes, or you have to go back to the client or the person that sent you the model and ask for extra things. But because Brian knows what he's doing, and he knows, he knows that I'm probably going to need some control like this. He's included all this stuff, which is amazing. So it's really, really handy. And all of these things as well will be useful for shading. So, he's probably thinking about that too. But this is kind of the scenario that you might come across on working on a shot where you have a model and you need to then generate some effects from it. So here's my VDB from my original skin. Here's my VDB from the sort of eroded version. And then using a VDB combine, I'm just going to investigate maybe what methods we could use here to create that difference that we need. So if you have a look at operation, we've got SDF difference. Maybe that's exactly what we need. You can see it looks a little weird. So let's just convert it to a polygon and see what that looks like. So, and sometimes you just need to inflate it a little bit. And obviously that was too much. And yeah, I don't think that is what we want. So we can swap these inputs around and see if that gives us a different result. Oh, maybe. There we go. Maybe that is it. We just need to swap those inputs around. Hey, Ivan, how you going? Welcome. If you've just joined us, I'm working on the model that Brian has generated in his previous stream, which the link is in the bio. So definitely go and check that out at some point. It's really, really cool. Really, really cool lesson on procedural modeling, and his last lesson was actually on turning his setup into a HDA, so creating a digital sort of tool, and that was awesome. So what we can actually see here is that we have this kind of stucco now as one sort of complete mesh, and you can actually see the brick indentations in it as well, which is kind of cool. So it's maybe a little bit kind of buggy. We might need to go yeah, cool, Ivan. We might need to go up in the resolution a little bit to fix some of these little issues, but let's just merge this back, and I might just color it so it's clear. Yeah, just blue, and then just merge it back with our original file, and let's have a look there we go. So you can see that that now has filled in most of the, you know, there's a few little weird sampling issues here and there with the VDB, but we've actually created now a mesh which like plugs that hole that we could, you know, we could use to do some sort of effect on. So that's cool. Even for shading, you know, something like that would be really handy. Really cool kind of additional layer on top. So let's just go back and have a look at our mask and see how that compares. So yeah, there's a lot of brick back here, so that kind of does compare with what we're getting here, although we are getting a few little gaps here and there. Maybe we need to possibly inflate this a little bit just to fill that in a touch. You can see that that's probably too much, so I think what we need to do is just up our resolution here. So let's go and do that. We'll go, what have we got? 005 there, and yeah, 005. So let's go down to 003. And the higher you go with this, obviously, you know, the slower it's going to run, the more RAM it's going to take, so you do have to be careful. So always check my voxel resolution. 2.9 million, still not too bad. I should open also my task manager and just keep an eye on my memory. I only have 32 gigs, so you know, it's easy to run over. So let's go 003 on the other side as well. So we need them to match. There we go. It's getting a lot smoother, and you can see on this one we've captured a lot more detail, so that might result in a better capture. That's looking pretty good. There's still a few little dodgy areas here and there. I might just go a little higher on that ISO value. You can see all these little ridges, and that is from the VDB, because VDBs are kind of made up of perfectly linear cubes. When they sample an area that is not completely linear, like a diagonal surface, they start to step. So that stepping is actually sort of the resolution over that diagonal surface. So if you know, have a look on the side, you think about all the VDB squares being linear to this line here, and all these little cubes. This is the stepping that's going through those VDB boxes. So if you want to get rid of that, you have to go higher on your resolution, unfortunately. I think this is kind of not too bad though. I think we can probably live with that. And we can actually get rid of a lot of these really small ones that we're getting. So what I might do here is now put a measure node down. Do they have to be cubes? Yeah, well that is just the way that volumes work. They're made up of uniform squares. So yeah, they do. There's no way to orient them or yeah, have them any other way than being completely, you know, just linear. So that is just one of the kind of limitations, I guess, of working with volumes. So what I'm going to do is put down a measure node now, and it's going to take a little while because if we have a look, we've got 883. Oh, it's not too bad. 883,000 polygons. So we've got all these tiny little bits here, tiny little sections. So I'm going to remove those by calculating the area of all connected pieces. So if we have a look at per piece, and I might actually put down a connectivity node. The connectivity node will have a look at the mesh overall and generate a class attribute for each connected set of geometry. So, you know, if I was to double click on some geometry here, there we go, you can see that that one is actually connected. So when you double click on geometry, there we go, that one is connected as well. So that's a big connected piece. But then there's all these little ones that is connected, but all these ones are not connected to these main bits. So that generates a class attribute, which if you have a look here, it's generated 13,512 different pieces. We can measure the area of each one of those pieces. So this will give me an area attribute per class. So if we have a look at that, you can see that there's a whole lot that are the same. I've actually sorted it now, so it might be a bit hard, but yeah, some of them are the same. Let's have a look. Let's just check. So what I'm going to do is put down a blast node and do, let's see, it's primitive attribute. So I'm going to say at area less than 1. See what that does, first of all. Set to primitives. It's removed everything. We should probably just check our maximum area. Oh, they're all really, really small, it looks like. Maybe. Let's go down. Yeah, they're all super duper small. There's a 0 area as well. That's not great. Let me just flick this over to primitive. I don't know if that might make a difference to our area calculation. It's possible that... Yeah, there we go. So I think that wasn't working because this was a point and this is calculating the primitive area. It wasn't actually using that. So make sure that they are the same, primitive and primitive. Now, when I blast, hopefully, you can see now I've only got those large area pieces. So let's go back and all the small ones are gone. There we go. So we've only really got that really large one there. So let's just take this down less than 0.2. See what we get back. Got nothing back. So there must be, these sections must be really quite small. 0.1, 0.01. Oh, there we go. 0.01 got back most of those ones. So we can just turn it on and off and see if we're still missing anything important. Looks like we've lost a couple of little important ones there. So I might go 0.05. No, still more. 0.01. Must be really, really small. There we go. So all those really tiny ones are gone now, which is great. Because, you know, if we were to simulate with those, that might cause a few issues. So let's now merge this. Just color that, merge it back with our original one and see what we've got. Okay, so you can see, you know, there's some areas here where it's not perfect because there's a lot of really fine detail there. But, you know, overall, I'm pretty happy with that. It's not too bad. There's a little bit of an intersection happening there where it's going through the interior wall. Hopefully that won't cause too many problems, but only time will tell. Now, what are we going to do with this? I'm thinking that we might fracture this stuff. So let's have a think about the best way to do that. The other thing we could do here, just to improve our resolution here on this stuff, is to try and put a little bit of adaptivity down. So if I add a little bit of adaptivity there, it potentially will create some, you know, some issues for rendering, but I think, you know, just so I don't completely overwhelm my computer. Also during the stream, you know, I have had my computer crash before, so I don't want that to happen again. So I'm just trying to keep this a little bit lighter. And you can see as I go up, basically what it's doing is just any area that is a bit flatter than others, where it doesn't need as much detail, it will try to simplify that mesh and remove polygons. So if we set that up to 1, you'll see it's kind of hit a limit, and it's actually at 1, it's actually starting to affect that area there. So I think 0.5 was probably a good kind of compromise. Okay, so let's see what we can do with this now. So we've got, if we have a look at our class, we could actually put a new connectivity node down and just see how many new classes we have to deal with. So we've got 27 now instead of 13,000. So that's pretty good. We've gotten rid of a lot of stuff. And if we have a look at our resolution, 432,000, which is good. So let's try fracturing this now. So instead of just fracturing the whole thing, putting down a Voronoi fracture, because we've got 27 or so different parts, I'm actually going to do a for each loop. For each named primitive, and I'm going to loop over each one of these parts individually. So I'm going to do, instead of piece name, piece attribute name, I'm going to do piece attribute class. And then there we go, we can see we've got a little chunk there coming through. So if I put a Voronoi fracture down and scatter, and I don't want to scatter 1,000 points on this tiny little piece, so I'm just going to, for starters, do 10. So that's going to fracture that up into 10 pieces. Have a look at my Voronoi fracture at the end. It's going to go through each one of those 27 pieces and fracture them up. And you can see on the big one, it's done 10 as well. So I actually end up with 10 large pieces. So I need to come up with a way of varying that scatter based on the size, which shouldn't be too difficult because I already have this area attribute coming through. So if we have a look inside of here, well, there we go. It's given us a different piece this time. These really small polygons could be problematic for fracturing, but you know, we'll just work with it and see what happens. So if we have a look at the area of this piece, it's really, really small, 0.001. So what we could try and do is in this force total count here, let's do a fit. And we're going to fit. What am I going to do? I'm going to actually, first of all, I'm going to put a point expression. Actually, if we have a look again, let's just check. Yeah, this area is all the same. So we can actually just grab the area. Actually, it's a primitive, so we need to do a prim expression, but we can just grab it off the first primitive. We don't need to look at all the primitives because they all have the same area. So let's do a primitive expression, prim, and we're going to grab that from the node before. So I'm just going to do for each begin 1. And then the next thing we need, you can see here, is the primitive number. So that would be 0. And then the name is area. Whoops. Area. And then the attribute index is 0 because it's a float. So there is only one index. And what you will see is that that returns, actually, because this is an integer value here, this value is 0.001, it's actually going to display 0. So what I'm going to do is fit this. So fit between 0 and, I think those larger scales were 4. So I'll just do 0 and 4. And so when it's really close to 0 or 0, I'll make it 10. But then when it's 4, I'll make it 100. So in theory, what this is going to do is, there we go, it returns me 10. So when this returns an area of 0, or even very close to 0, it will return approximately 10 as the minimum. But then for those larger pieces, when the area is greater and they approach that area of 4, then I'm going to get 100 points scattered on here. And what that will result in is a varying amount of fractures happening. So the really small pieces will get not very many fractures, and the big pieces will get a lot more. So let's check that out. And you can see down here it's going through each pass and fracturing. I'll take a bit longer this time because some of them are having those 100-piece fractures. And also it's varying per loop, so it's taking a little bit longer to calculate. Hopefully it won't take too much longer. And there we go. So we can see now 100 is probably still too low, but you can see, you know, this one only has 10. This one has significantly more now. It's not those really big pieces. So we can go and tweak that now, obviously. So we can go, let's go, maybe take that minimum down. We'll go minimum maybe 3, maximum 500. And I think probably we'll need to go even higher than that if we want like a really fine amount of fracturing happening. But let's just see what that looks like first. Our memory's still sort of sitting around half, which is good. It's not, you know, we're not doing anything too crazy yet. Let's just see what happens. And this is only 27 pieces. I mean, it can get very slow doing this stuff in a for each loop, but it's certainly the best way to create variance across multiple pieces, and to also do things like that where you're using an attribute, using the measure or using the area to vary something based on the size. It's definitely the best way to do it. Also, running a fracture, you know, over lots of disconnected pieces can often cause problems, can cause, you know, some things to break. So I find it's better to try and do it like this, where you're treating each disconnected piece separately. definitely taking longer now. Oh, there we go. And there we go. We can see now we've got lots more pieces going on. So I think just for a proof of concept, I'm going to use this. And you can see these ones have very few now. So that one was just the 3. And then our big one there, which had the area of 4, will have, 500 pieces potentially. Probably want to put that up to maybe 1,000 or more, 2,000 maybe even 10,000. Get those really, really fine. But just for a proof of concept, I'm going to use that and just see what happens when I plug this into a maybe a rigid body simulation. So I'm going to put an assemble down, recalculate the name. Because you're doing a Voronoi fracture in a loop, what you end up with is a lot of pieces that have the same name. So if you see, there's piece 0, but every time we loop over, it will generate something called piece 0. So you end up with multiple objects with the same name. So you want to recalculate that name afterwards. And then we can pack them for our rigid body simulation. So we've got 848 individual pieces. That, if we go into a dot network and run that into bullet, so I'm just going to put down an RBD packed object. I might put down a rigid body solver set to bullet rather than a bullet solver. Oops. Rather than a bullet solver, just because it has these additional pre and post solve inputs, and that's useful for adding pop forces and other things. You can do that with a bullet solver too, but you need a multi-solver and it's just a little bit more work. So I'm going to do first context. Plug that in. Hey, there we go. And I'm going to merge in a ground plane as well. Yeah, that's right, John. This is just, before I go crazy with the amount of fracturing, because it's going to take a long time, I want to make sure that, I'm first on the right path. So you can see there's a little bit of intersection with the ground plane, so always just either shift your model, but because shifting my model will recalculate my for each loop, I'm just going to shift my ground plane down a little bit. Yeah, so, I want to kind of work things out on my setup at a slightly lower, resolution, less fractures. Make sure that everything's working. If there's any kind of, problems, I want to sort of work that out before I go, full high res. Because I know, I can just go and change that scatter amount. That will give me more pieces, and I'll be confident then that it will, that it's going to work. So what am I going to do here? I'm going to put a gravity node down first, just for a simple test, and we'll just make sure that these fall. And there we go. Perfect. So that's good. Runs pretty quick, which is great. And let's now grab our original guy here, because we're going to need that for a collision as well. So this is not going to work as a collision straight off the bat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert him to a VDB, which I already am here, but I'm going to, is that what I want to do? Maybe I'll do a poly reduce on this first. Let's see. It's going to take a little while to analyze that, but then I can set that down to 10% potentially. There'll be a bit less to work with. So if I set that down to 10, hopefully that'll still give me enough detail for the collision. Poly reduce is actually pretty good in calculating where it needs to keep detail and where it needs to get rid of it. And just being able to say I want 10% is really great. So, it's quite useful to just say I want something that's 10%. There we go. So that has done a pretty good job of reducing that down. And I think hopefully that will still kind of work well as a collision object. Let's just check out recalculated normals, make sure that that's all still okay. Yep. So the thing with collisions, in Bullet is that they use convex mesh. So if we have a look at a convex hull here, this is what our collision object is going to look like at the moment. You could set it to concave, which is going to give us this, but it'll be incredibly slow. And it's not really an efficient way of doing collisions, especially when you have such high resolution mesh, it'll be very slow. So we want to basically break this model up into small convex hulls that are all part of the one object. But let me show you. So the way that one of the ways that I do that is to actually just Voronoi fracture. You can use this convex decomposition node, but I find that that doesn't kind of work as well as the Voronoi fracture method. So the Voronoi fracture method is just very simple and it's very kind of familiar because it's just exactly what we did over there. We just are going to fracture this up into a bunch of pieces. So I'll just take this down to 100, run it into the Voronoi fracture, and it'll take a little while because we've still got reasonably high level of polygons, but there we go. And so what that has done, if we run that into a convex hull, let's see if we can, doesn't look like we can do that on here, but let's take this into bullet. So I'm going to, what am I going to do? I'm going to assemble this into pack geometry, and I'm going to run that into the second input of the .NET there. And then RBD packed object again, merge those two together. Break it, lol. Yeah, just want to break this thing. No. There we go. There it comes in. So if we turn off our other one for a second, there's our geometry. Let's turn on our guide geometry. And there you go. So you can see what we get for a collision object is these little sort of broken sections. You know, and if we simulated this as an active object, it would fall apart. But this is just a static object. So these now become our collision shapes, rather than if I bypass this Voronoi fracture, I get that. So the fracturing is really important in creating that nice clustered shape, and we can still leave our geometry representation to convex hull. You can choose concave, but like I said, not efficient, very slow, and yeah, it's prone to break. So I'm going to now, obviously, I need to make this a lot more. So it was pretty quick, so I'm going to go up to, yeah, what the hell, we'll go to 1,000. And hopefully it doesn't take too long. Just have a coffee. So the smaller we go, the better we'll capture these really fine details, and that's kind of ultimately, you know, what we need here is that we need these little sort of indentations where our plaster geometry is to be captured for our collision. That's the really important part, so that they're sitting nicely inside, so when we simulate, they don't just explode out straight away. So let's have a look. Hopefully it'll be done soon. Another thing we could actually look at doing, which I might do, is actually use that mask attribute that we have, which defines where the areas of brick and stucco are, or actually even our stucco geometry. Nectar of the gods, that's right. I'd be lost without my coffee, John. Yeah, maybe we could actually use the stucco geometry itself, scatter points on that, and use that as the input for our Voronoi fracture. And that might be a good way to get detail just in the areas that we need it. So there we go, we've got a lot more pieces now. That's good. Let's check it out in DOPS. Wow, look at that. So lots of little pieces there. And because we've got a very small scale scene here, our collision padding is a little high for this. So I'm going to take that down. There you go. So you can see now it sort of fills out the area a little more. But we're still lacking detail, collision detail in these areas that we really need it. So let's go and let's try this, where we take our stucco geometry that we created here, maybe after the blast, and scatter points on that. Turn off relax. It's pretty slow as well. 10,000. No, it's not going to go too crazy. So let's go 1,000. Plug that in here. And what we'll see is that, you know, with this one where we're using the scatter, it's just giving us a very uniform fracturing over the whole thing. What we should see now is smaller pieces in the areas where our points exist, and then it should get larger as they kind of go away. So there should be these little clusters now of smaller bits and then larger bits for everywhere else. Let's try that. It's still 1,000 points, so, you know, possibly will take the same amount of time still. But let's see if it's any better in terms of capturing this detail. Unfortunately, you have to do this with RBDs. With other types of collisions, you can use the volume collision method, but that doesn't work with bullet. So the volume collision method is great because you can use a volume, you know, VDB to represent your collision, and that works really nicely. But for VDB, for bullet, we don't have that luxury. We have to use this kind of convex decomposition to generate those collision surfaces. There's another method that I'll try after this. If this doesn't give me the desired collision, I might try something else. There's lots of different tips and tricks you can try with this stuff to try and make it work better. Obviously, this is a very detailed model, so it's, you know, it's going to be challenging. So it kind of worked, but we're definitely not getting enough detail in this area here. But you can see like where all these areas of stucco are, we've got a lot more fractures, and then where they aren't, they're a lot bigger. So that will kind of generate an interesting result in here. Let's just have a look at that. Yeah, so you can see it's definitely, you know, done something, but not amazing. Let's just run this and see, you know, kind of what it looks like with collision. I suspect that we'll get some kind of exploding going on because there's intersections. And I might just take the collision padding down on this one as well. So this one's set to static, so it's a collision object. So I'm just going to call this one collision static. So you don't always have to use a static object down here for collision. Sometimes it's better to use an RBD packed object. And this one can be like active stucco. Hit play. Will it explode? Not too bad. It is being pushed out. You can see them sort of moving outwards, but it's actually not too bad. So maybe I don't need to worry about it too much. There we go. So that's looking cool. Pretty happy with that, actually. So you can imagine, you know, if those were really fine pieces, it would kind of look pretty cool. So let's now have a look at, and yeah, I'm liking your idea, John, with the light shining through. I think that could be really cool. And we're getting some pieces that are kind of sticking as well, possibly because of the intersection. So that's kind of interesting as well, an interesting sort of result where, you know, some pieces are actually just sticking there because they're kind of clinging to the surface a little bit. All right, so yeah, I think maybe we don't need to go crazy with the collisions. It's kind of seems to be working pretty well. So what are we going to do now? We could go higher resolution, definitely, but let's just work on what this effect is going to be. So I'm thinking that I'm not going to have everything falling off at once. What I'm going to do is actually activate this stuff over time, and perhaps how could we activate that? I mean, we could just do a very simple top-down activation, or we could actually use noise to activate it as well. Sticking with the sort of theme of what's going on with the stucco, it's very noise-driven, so perhaps we should use noise. So out here, I'm going to create a little wrangle. I'm going to say I at active equals 0. Deactivate those pieces. And then in here, This is why I use the rigid body solver as well, so that I can plug things into here. In here, I'm going to put down a SOP solver. And post-solve, pre-solve, I don't think it matters which one you plug that into. You might get a slightly different result, but that's fine. So I'm going to now create an attribute VOP. Prefer using VOPs with noise. It's a little bit kind of more user interfacey rather than typing it through Vex. So I'm going to just use turbulent noise. Pause. Into a bind export. And, oh, actually, maybe I'll use color first of all. Let's see. Might be, I don't know if it'll visualize properly. It might. Let's just give it a go. So maybe it will in here. Let's try that. So I'll take my frequency actually up because of the scale. I need to put a fit in here and crush this. It's a little bit hard to see sometimes. I might just ditch that color as well because it's making it a little hard to see. Just ditch that. Oh. It's always, I should have just deleted it because that is causing the 4H to recook, which is always annoying. But oh well, you just have to wait for it again. Yeah, so any upstream changes to a 4H, you know, above the 4H loop are going to cause the 4H to trigger. Unless you cache it to disk, which, you know, obviously would then require you to recache your 4H every time you wanted to change it. But sometimes, yeah, when you have a 4H that's so slow, that is, yeah, it's really important to cache it. You don't want to have to, every time I open this file, for example, I will, you know, have to recache this before I can get going. So it would be a good idea to save it to disk. It's reminding me that I should save this file to disk as well, just in case it crashes for whatever reason. Because that would be a pain if I had to rebuild it from scratch. Let's see. You can do it. Come on. Tells you what pass it's on here, but I'm not sure this is completely accurate all the time. Thankfully, it's only 22 pieces. Yeah, that's right, John. I mean, I've had some of these 4H loops, yeah, just take an extreme amount of time. If you're doing really kind of complex high-res stuff, then it can certainly take ages. I'm just gonna call this ruins. Just saving this, just in case. Sometimes saving triggers 4H loops as well, which is awful. Okay, so I've gotten rid of my color now. Hopefully now I can see. The reason I wasn't sure whether this would actually visualize is because these are packed pieces. Quite often color doesn't really display properly on packed geometry, and you can see it kind of isn't really. Let's just crank this frequency up. Yeah, you can see it's kind of just affecting the whole thing as one. So it's not really working. One thing that we can do is actually even just copy this attribute VOP and jump back out and do it here. And just do it on unpacked geometry so that we can actually just see. And there you go. So you can see our noise. So we can set it all up here and visualize this and get it all working. So what I'm going to do is just take the frequency down, and using my fit, I can kind of have this noise grow from being black to ramping down. And as I pull these fits down and closer together, they get more contrasty. But as I pull this one sort of down towards 0, and then this one as well, you can see how it sort of creates that effect of growing noise. So if I promote these two, promote parameter, yeah, I can leave those, don't need to rename them. And then animate these over time. So this is not time-based, so I can scrub it. There's no clock icon, which tells me that this whole model is not time-based at this point, which is good. But now when I do this, it will be. So if I set a keyframe, let's go up to, I want it to be completely black, so I'll set 2 keyframes there. And if I go to maybe 120, there you go, you can see that clock icon appear now. So this network is now time dependent because I've set keyframes. So let's just pull these down all the way down. That one can be sort of 0, 0, 1, so it's a little bit behind. Ah, there we go. So it actually kicks off a little bit later, around 50. And you can see that noise creeping through till eventually it goes white. So I'm going to use this noise to do my activation. So actually looks like I need to start my effect around 0.5. So I'm just going to pull those down around there. Okay, a little bit more. Hey, there we go. All right, cool. I think that'll work. It's pretty slow, but let's see. So I'm going to copy this into my .NET, into my SOP solver. It's a cool thing about, working in a SOP solver. You can use all these SOP tools. And so I'm setting color on my packed pieces here. And I'm going to change that now to be bind export active. And this is an integer. So what I'm hoping, let's just check it out in here. We can actually sort of scrub in here. You can even turn off the dop cook, so you can just scrub and see what happens. So you can see the color is kind of not doing great things, but let's check out the geometry spreadsheet active attribute. Hide all and just show active. Whoops. So you can see they're all 0. Oh, there's 1 there. What we should see over time is that we should get them all kind of flicking over to 1s. There we go. It's starting to see it. It's a bit hard to see with sorting this, but you can see them all flicking over to 1s. So let's just run it and see what happens. So we're setting active to 1. When it's 0, it's off. When it's 1, it's active. We can take our collision out of the mix for now and just see kind of what this is going to do as well. So let's just hit play. Hopefully we'll see little bits fall down over time. There we go. We can start to see some falling down. And so there's a bit of a problem where actually some pieces are, because it's noise based and noise is kind of different through world, what is actually happening here is that over time, that color makes it really hard to kind of visualize, but what's happening over time is that they're actually falling into patches of 0 or black and they're deactivating. So that's a bit of a problem. So we need to do something else. So let's just go watch it again. And you'll see them kind of stop. They fall and then stop. They fall into these areas of black. So, yeah, not working. Yeah, it is recalculating per frame, John. It's not accumulating. I always forget this when I do it, until I do it and I realize it's accumulating per frame. And eventually when I go all white with this, they will all fall down because there's no more black areas left. But it is recalculating per frame. So, because actually what I'm doing is just here, this, so this comes in, it comes in live, and then it just basically stamps over the active attribute to replace it with either a 0 or 1. So one way actually could be just to do this, where I bind in the active attribute, like that, and add to it like that. Yeah, you got it. You know. So that way I'm actually not going to replace the active attribute coming in. I'm just going to add to it with either a 0 or a 1 value, and that's going to push my active attribute above 1, which possibly won't cause any issues, but not great to have an active attribute. It's a Boolean operation, so it's either 0 is off, 1 is on. you don't really want it pushing into, you know, 2s and 3s and 4s and 10s. So you can actually just then clamp it to 0 to 1. So just like that. That will then just force it to be between 0 and 1. So that's the way that I get around that sort of setting it back to being off. If you just add it, it's going to be 1, and then it can't go, but 0 adding to 1 is still 1. So it just won't rewrite over it. So let's try that. I hope that makes sense. I always forget that that's what happens. Sometimes SOP solver behavior, you know, kind of varies depending on which solver you're on. But with the active stuff, it's important that you want it to stay active once you've activated it. There we go. And that's working now. So that add is all you need to do there, which is good. So there we go. So we've got this kind of activation over time driven by noise, which is great. So we can really control that animation. We can control it in SOPs and visualize it. You can also unpack inside the SOP solver and visualize it in there, but it's a bit dangerous because you definitely don't want to unpack and then let it come out to the solver unpacked, because then it will just break. So you can definitely visualize it in there unpacked, but you just need to make sure that you use that as a visualizer off to the side. So there we go. We've got our gradual stuff happening. So let's turn our collision back on and we'll see what that looks like. Coffee break. So now it's a little bit easier to see, and we should see now just those areas falling off. You could imagine an earthquake or something, you know, a bit of camera shake might look cool on this effect. It's, you know, it's obviously a kind of small scale Buddha model, but with the bricks, it you know, it feels like it's much larger. Yeah, you know, you could imagine it being like a really big thing on a mountain or something, an earthquake happening and this stucco kind of falling off. Oh, it looks like there's a giant piece falling off here. Oh, you know what? I think what I've done here, I'm actually activating my collision object. Oh, Brian, I'm so sorry. I've destroyed your Buddha. Let's stop it before it goes any further. It actually looks very cool, but I do only want to affect the stucco. So that's funny. I didn't really think of that, because this is coming in as a static object. I can activate it by setting all of my objects coming in here to 1. Maybe what we should do is actually set our collision object to active equals 0. Perhaps that's part of the issue. I don't know. Let's set that to 0. And then on this one, we'll just say override attribute from SOPs. And that will just overwrite that to be 0 every frame on this one. So let's just double check that works. I'll turn off my active stucco. And let me run it without this first and just see if I can see what's going on there. It might be fine now that I set that active to 0 on the attribute wrangle. That might be fine. Although, no, there we go. It's cracking. So we don't want that to happen. We could also do this where we create a group. So, or actually we could do it based on the name, but yeah, group's probably easiest. So group, I'll set to points, enable the base group. That will just add them all in. So we'll call this one collision. We'll call this one, I don't know, stucco or active group or something like that. And then in the SOP solver, we can just apply this only to the active group. I don't have that turned on. Active, there we go. So that will only apply to the active group now. It won't apply to the collision group. All right, so let's try that. We'll turn that off. Just run this. Hopefully it doesn't crack again. It's always good to have groups, especially if you're dealing with lots of different geometries. Here we go. So no cracking. That's good. Saved Save the Buddha. And let's run this now and make sure that this is still working. Should be fine. Yeah, there we go. It might be cool to, I might not have time for it this week, or maybe I will, we'll see. It might be cool to have like him sitting in a kind of lotus pool of water or something and have these things crash down into the water, and we can, we can look at doing splashes and stuff like that. That might be really kind of really nice, to have that water effect as well. Yeah, so this is working now. Our Buddha isn't completely cracking, which is great. And the next thing that I would probably do is I would continue along with this setup as the low resolution kind of fracture where I don't have thousands and thousands of pieces. So I'm going to do a DOP import here, and I'm just going to run through like the whole setup before I go back and refine that fracture geometry. So DOP import, and I'm going to DOP import just the active stucco object, because everything else I have, and I don't need the ground plane coming out here. So I've got that. And then at this point, it would be good to put a file cache down as well. That's, important. So I'll get rid of the hip name out of there. I like to do this where I just do $os/ and then $os again. So what that's going to do is create a folder. So if I rename this to stucco sim, this is going to create a folder called stucco sim as well. So here's my shortcut: stream, geo, stucco sim 95. That saves you from having a folder full of all sorts of different BGO files or with different names. It puts each one in its own folder. So that's really kind of handy. Something I picked up from somebody. And yeah, it's actually a really good way of sorting that stuff. Otherwise, you just end up with a multitude of different files in the geo folder, and it becomes a big mess. It's hard to see what you're working with. So I'm just going to save that. It's going to go through and continue writing out that sim. And then we can have a look at adding in, all the additional effects as well. So I would always do this where I set up my base kind of simulation, and then I go through and set up what I would call my secondary effects. So they might be grit, dust, additional, debris, all that stuff is going to tie this all together. And then I'll go back and add my detail to my original RBD sim if I need it, because quite often the secondaries will add a lot of detail, and maybe that fine detail that you feel like you're lacking in your RBD sim might just come from the secondary effects anyway. So sometimes it's kind of it's better to go ahead, even though you think you don't have a lot of detail in your base RBD sim, go forwards and push those secondaries in, and then see what you've got to deal with. You might be creating a lot of dust, which might actually cover a significant part of those RBDs, and then you might not need to add more detail, especially like for interior detail and things like that. Sometimes it's not totally necessary, because you're covering it with a lot of stuff. So I find it's important to kind of run through the whole thing first, and then go back and assess where you might need more detail to be added. Okay, so there we go, 240 written out. It's just going through and finishing that off. I don't know actually what this final step is that it's doing, but even though it says it's at 240, it's still calculating 25 more things. I guess it's just finishing off writing that stuff to disk. Pyro dust, yeah, absolutely, John. So pyro dust, particle grit, even maybe some vellum grains or something. There we go. So there's our simulation, and now we can start the secondaries. So I'm going to unpack this geometry to access. At the moment I'm dealing with packed fragments. if I unpack this to access those polygons, I can run the debris source. Awesome node, very useful for creating debris particle sources. So it creates a point. I'll just cancel it, go back to the first frame. Basically what you do is you set the first frame of your simulation, and that would be the kind of frame that your fractured geometry is not broken. So it's not broken on frame 1, so we'll set that to 1. And basically what it does is it searches for disconnecting geometry. So as these pieces fall apart and fall away from each other, it will detect that. Yeah, I'm glad you stayed too, John. It will detect that they separated, and it will give you a point on the surface. So if we go through, it's a solver, so it does have to run and cook, and this is another thing probably to file cache out. But let's just run it through a little bit. Hopefully we can see some of these points on the surface being created. And it gives them a life as well, so that they're not, you can kind of control how long this particle is going to be there, how long maybe it's going to be emitting dust for or grit. So you can up and down that lifespan in here, or you can actually blast based on the lifespan as well. We've got this search radius here as well, so that is the distance that it's going to search for that detected separation. So 0.1 is probably quite large on a model of this scale, but you can see these points here, and they come out, they start white. And if we template the geometry before, you can see that they're kind of stuck. They follow the geometry as it's falling, so they're kind of stuck to the geometry. They start off white, and over their life they will fade to black, and eventually they'll be removed at that point. So there we go, we've got some more up here. So I'm just going to write this to disk as well. And so I'll copy my file cache there and call this one debris source. This one can take a little while to calculate, so I'll just save it to disk and see what we get. We might not need the full 240 frames, because I think it was all pretty much fallen off by around 120 anyway. But this will give us a great base for doing the rest of the secondary effects. From this, we can generate our pyro source. We can generate particles. We can generate many different particle sort of setups where maybe we use one that's a bit more sparse for adding little extra chunks or little extra bits of debris. Then we can add one which is just particles for a very fine grit. And yeah, we can run it, set some density values on it and run it for a pyro source. So it's really, really useful. And it's a HDA, it's a digital asset, so you can unlock it, dive inside and see how they're doing it as well. So it's a really, really useful tool. And quite often I'll just use that, sometimes I have to go in and modify things occasionally with it to get very specific behaviors, but quite often, most of the time I can use that for generating all these source points that I need. So we'll just kind of go through and wait for this to calculate. I'll let it run to about 140, I think. That should probably be enough, hopefully. How is everybody going out there? Hope it's not too boring and slow for you. Sorry about all the cooking time. This is life in Houdini is waiting for things to calculate. But if I don't write it to disk, it will be a lot slower, and I won't be able to progress much more. So it is an important step to cache these things out. And like I said, every time that I open this file, if I don't cache these things to disk, I would have to wait for these every time. So in a studio setting, we definitely cache things out. And one of the big reasons we cache things to disk, apart from, you don't want to have to re-simulate things that take hours and hours every time, is when we send it to the farm, the render farm is just, you just want it to read off disk. You don't want to have a rendering computer having to simulate something. Because what happens with a rendering computer is it picks up the file, it renders one frame, and then it might pick up another job and render a frame of that, or it might pick up the next frame. But every time it has every time it picks that frame up, it has to recalculate. So if you don't have any file caches in there, and let's say it picks up frame 120 and tries to render 120 and there's no file caches, it has to simulate from 0 to 120 before it can even render that one frame. So you could have a render that takes 6 hours. The rendering might take 20 seconds, but it's done 6 hours of simulating just so it can render that one frame. So it's really important in a studio setting to file cache so that when a rendering computer picks up your file to render, it's just reading that final result off disk. So, there are lots of reasons why file caching is important, but that's a big one for, studio working. So yeah, it's a good habit to get into to file cache relatively often, and certainly when you get to that last step, it's a good idea to file cache your final thing out when you're going to render. I'm glad I'm helping you get distracted from going over your week 6 model, John. I will help you with that, I promise. Thanks, Ivan. Glad you're able to join me. What are you working on at the moment, Ivan? You've been doing some pretty cool stuff lately. Almost finished. I reckon this actually I can stop this now. We don't need those last 20 frames. Let's have a look at this. Oh, beautiful. And it's so good to be able to scrub this now. So you can see now we've got those points falling, and this is going to be awesome. So first of all, let's just set up a very simple pop sim and plug that in and just see what we get. So need a few things here. I'm going to put a ground plane down. I actually moved my ground plane, if you remember, in my .NET. So I'm just going to jump in and copy that one because I want these to be the same. So merge ground plane. There we go. Pop force for gravity. Do -9.8 for starters. Let's see what happens. So now pop source, we just need to change the emission type to points or all points. All points will use the impulse activation. Yeah, exactly, John. I mean, this is exactly what what you are doing for that pyro stuff. So I'll get to the pyro in the last half of this. I think that should be able to show you just how quickly and easily you can do it. So yeah, let's just check out this. So set that to points. Points will use constant activation. All points will use impulse, and that'll just spew all the points every frame. Oh, you were working on that scene. Oh, cool. Awesome, Ivan. That sounds great. I'd look forward to seeing what you've come up with. I'd like to keep working on that one as well, but I thought this week would be good to work on something different. So let's have a look. There we go. So we've got particles raining down, and they're just falling straight down because we have no collision object. So let's go and generate that. First, in anticipation of creating that, I'll put down a static object, just merge it in, and then we can go all the way back up here. Got lots of stuff going on here. We've got this is going to be our collision object, right? And I'm going to do a VDB from polygons. I'm just doing another one because this one was super high res, and maybe we don't need as high a resolution off of that. I'm going to go 0, 1. There we go. That looks not too bad. Let's try that and see. So I'm gonna put a null down over here. I'll need to clean up this this file soon, just so I know what's going on. So I'm gonna say out collision geo, and I'm gonna use a proxy volume to calculate the collision. This is what I was talking about before, where you can use VDBs to generate collision information, where with particles and pyro you can use that, but with bullet you can't. So it's much easier to do it with this. So swap path would be .. out collision geo. It's not deforming, so I don't have to worry about that. Collisions, it's under the RBD solver tab. Mode, volume sample. // out collision VDB. We can just check that there. There we go. Looks pretty good. Don't need to go crazy high res with it. It's given us a pretty good representation. Particles are pretty forgiving, to be honest. And let's see what we get. So it's a bit slower because it's calculating that collision every frame now. But hopefully we'll see those particles bouncing off and colliding. There we go. So that's looking a lot nicer. Got some crazy bounce or low friction. I think it looks like bounce maybe on the ground plane. So I'm going to set that to 0. And perhaps on the static object as well, I might just turn that down a little bit, 0.1. And the source points as well, I need to go back and just clean that up a little bit because they're emitting for, I think, a whole second, which is 24 frames. And you can see I end up with like this constant kind of raining of points. And perhaps that's not, not exactly what I want. Or maybe I just need to break it up with a bit of random velocity. Might help. Even some drag might help as well. But you can see it's giving us that cool kind of falling sand, falling grains kind of look. So now at this point, we're kind of getting, starting to get there with our secondaries. So let's go and just merge out the pop object only. So star, pop, star. And let's have a look at this all together with our, what have we got? We've got our stucco sim and our base mesh pier. Merge everything back together. There we go. So that's looking cool. So we've got now some particles, very, very small amounts. So I think we need to crank that up quite a bit. So let's go and crank that up. But you can see how we're starting to build up this effect now. And it's just, like I keep saying quite often, it's about layers. So we're using the rate here. Let's crank that up to 50,000. See what happens. I'm going to, on the attributes as well, just add some variance here. I might just start off with a little bit just to see kind of, whoa, look at that. Wow, that ran so quick. That's crazy. I don't know why it's going so quick now. So you can see that variance has just contributed to a lot of spreading out of that source. Gravity is crazy fast, so I'm gonna do -1. And it's kind of okay to, play with gravity and just play with scale and things like that. I don't know why this is running so quick now, but good. I'm glad that it is. So yeah, I think maybe that variance is a little much. It's just maybe I'll just turn it off for a second. Okay, so definitely helps, but it's just looks like because of our scale as well, small values. And so these are emitting for too long. So let's have a look at their life. They have this age attribute, and we can just blast that based on that attribute when it gets too high, or based on whatever threshold we like. So I'll just do age greater than 0.25 for instance. So that to points. And what we'll see is that those particles will disappear a lot quicker. So you can kind of see, turn them back on, you can see those areas that go into the black. When I have this on, they turn off. I could do 0.1 for example. There you go, you see they live for a very short amount of time now. Even 0.01, so that I just get that kind of point where they're cracking, but nothing beyond that. You see that? Still got a lot of bounce happening. Let's go to the pop object, physical tab. Set that bounce to 1. Set friction to 1. Oops. There we go, that's a bit better. Bit less kind of crazy and bouncy. That looks really nice. Kind of looks a bit like water, but you know, sand, I think when it's really fine sand does tend to sort of behave a little bit like water sometimes. So I think that's pretty cool. Let's just try a little more on the bounce. Yeah, that's nice. Okay, so yeah, we can always play with this age value as well, just up it a little bit. Try different sort of results and see, you know, see what kind of happens when we emit a little longer. We can also vary the yeah, exactly. Indiana Jones mummy feel. Yeah, I love that stuff. Kind of looks, you know, if we rendered this in gold, could be the kind of could be the gold idol underneath, gold bricks underneath the stucco. So you can also vary this stuff as well. So for instance, I think if we just do here randomize magnitude, this gives us the vex code that we need. But basically what we're doing is just creating a random based on the ID of the particle and then multiplying that against the force. So here's our force parameter here. So we can just say force times equals random value between 0.5 and 1. So some of them will get a value of 0.5 times -1, which will give us -0.5. Some of them will get the full amount. So it'll just help create some more variance. So some will fall less than others. You know, just all this sort of stuff helps just create more randomness, more variance. When you're trying to create realistic things, randomness and variance is what it's all about. Yeah, gold bricks, John. I'm digging that idea. I think that could be a cool thing to investigate. So I think, you know, this is kind of looking pretty cool. Let's go back and have a look. These, you know, some of these streams potentially are a little bit too kind of together, especially these ones that are kind of coming off the nose. They're a little bit sort of uniform and not really broken up enough. But yeah, I mean, it's not too bad. We'll persist and see, you know, what it keeps looking like when we add our other things in. But yeah, I think this is going to work pretty well. All right, let me set this to smooth shaded. I'm just going to give the stucco a little color so I can differentiate it. Just a different shade maybe. There we go. And let's just do a little flipbook here so we can assess. Oh, it's not going to be a great framing of it actually. Just wait till this pops up. I always forget that it's going to do like a HD aspect. So let's go something like that. And then we can assess the motion. It's proof of concept. Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, at this stage, yes, it's proof of concept. I will go back and probably refine this at some point to add detail. And, you know, I'm also just coming up with stuff on the fly. There's no plan. So, you know, I want to make sure that it all works before I hit the, you know, the crazy fracture button, or the, you know, all the millions of points that might be needed for a final result. Just because, you know, I don't want to overwhelm my computer, and I don't want to kind of make it slow either. You know, I want things to be fast to work on so that I can work everything out, and then, you know, finally when I've sort of nailed down a lot of the stuff, I can flick it over to being the high-res fraction model or the high-res amount of points. But I can be confident that most things are going to still work. So yeah. Yeah, I think these ones on the nose are a little bit kind of wacky. It looks a little bit like there's a bit of a delay, I think, between... I mean, I did set my force, I suppose, to be quite low. So that maybe is part of it, that there's there's now a disconnect between, you know, the chunks that fall off and the grain that follows. So perhaps I do need to up my force a little bit. It's possibly, you know, possibly what's going on there. Maybe some extra variance might help. But it's always good to flipbook. You know, it's important to kind of assess this thing in real time rather than scrubbing the viewport or trying to play through the viewport as well. It doesn't really give you a real-time view. Only when you flipbook it and you can actually see it to some of these things sort of show up properly. So yeah, I think, you know, these kind of, the way this is sort of fracturing and then spawning those kind of pieces afterwards is a bit weird. It may actually be the separation radius that I've got on there that is too big. So you can see, you know, I'm looking at these ones here when they break off. They break off there on the cheek, and then a bit after, those points spawn on them. So that makes me think that there's something a bit wrong with my debris source there. It's the same for the bit on the nose, you know, it falls off and then those bits kind of fall off with it. So it's a bit kind of odd. Also, they don't actually seem to be following the velocity of the chunks. They just seem to be falling straight down. So one thing that I should check here, I'll just cancel this flip booking, and I'm going to hit save on that, is the velocity here from our stucco sim. So, that's why. No velocity. So let's put a trail down. You can transfer the velocity from the bullet sim, but I find it is a good idea to recalculate. So our debris source actually had no velocity. So that's, you know, a big problem, because basically it's not going to impart any of that movement from the sim onto it. It's just going to emit the particle and it's going to fall straight down. That's why it looked so kind of weird. So I'm going to calculate velocity. That's going to give me a velocity attribute. So I've created a marker here. This is just erroring. So we should see when they start moving. There we go. It's got some velocities. That's going to impart onto my debris source. Unfortunately, I'll have to recalculate this. Although, what I could do here, it's a little bit kind of dodgy, but what I could do here, instead of recalculating, just because I don't have you know, a lot of time, I can transfer the velocities from that. You can see this is actually erroring. The reason it's erroring is because this velocity approximation is set to backwards difference, and on the very first frame it looks to the frame before, but there is no frame before because this starts at 1 and this load from file is set to report error on missing frames. You set that to no geometry, this error goes away because it's no longer when it looks back, it doesn't hit that error that this generates when there's no geo. It's a little bit of a kind of weird thing. So if I do this, I transfer velocity from those pieces onto my debris points, it'll be slightly slower, but now you can see they have velocity. And let's have a look at our popnet difference now. Yeah, that's right, John. That's why they weren't following. They were just kind of looking like they were hanging or just being emitted and then, you know, kind of falling straight down rather than flowing with the pieces. And maybe that's why they looked like they were just kind of being created, and then yeah, they weren't squirting out like they should have been. We also don't have the chunks in here as collisions, so we need to bring them in at some point as well. There we go. Here we can see they have velocity now, so you can see they're actually getting emitted outwards with the chunks. So they're actually following the chunk's velocity now, which again may not necessarily be the best kind of result either. You can also try and reverse the velocity so that instead of completely following, they could actually be squirting backwards, which can give you more of a sort of trail effect, so that from the chunk they're sort of emitting backwards like a meteor trail or something. That can kind of be sometimes useful. You just have to kind of play with these velocities and just sort of see what works best. You can see here that that's kind of, it is looking a little bit weird because they're actually shooting up. So it's maybe just way too strong, this velocity, because now it looks like he's just shooting lasers out of his head. So maybe we'll just go very small amount. Hey David, welcome. Yeah, glad you could catch them too. Hope you're doing well. You working on anything cool at the moment, David? So let's see what this looks like. We could actually probably start our particle simulation from 30 instead of starting it at 1. This one that shoots out over this way is the one I'm kind of curious to see what it does now with the backwards velocity. You can see it's a little bit better. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it definitely requires playing with. You can vary the velocity as well using similar kind of random sort of functions. Lightning bolts. Oh, definitely. Maybe we can have a look at some lightning next week. Or if you can't wait, then let me know. But yeah, totally. I think there are so many ways to do lightning. Some of them, some people do them very complicated ways, but there's some really simple ways to do stuff as well. So what else could we do? We could put a drag down. That can help as well. Random. Oh, not that one. Pop drag. Randomize that as well. Use Vex. We don't have a provided option here, so oops. What we can do is just create another sort of random. So basically, what do? We take this air resistance here. It's called parameter air resist. So we can say air resist equals or times equals fit01 rand at id. And because we're using rand id, potentially in multiple places, here we've used it again. If I use that same expression rand id, in every node it will generate me the same random result. So to add to the randomness and get that to be different, you can just offset that id by a value, whatever, 1 is enough to change it. 2 doesn't have to be. I usually just put in a whole bunch of numbers, but even 1 will change the random result so that not every particle gets exactly the same kind of thing being done to it. And this just helps to create more variance. So we could set that to 0 and 1, and then some particles will get the full amount of drag and some particles will get 0 drag. So again, it's all just about varying things. John, curious about less complicated way to do lightning. Yeah, sure. I'll try and do something next week then. There's a lot. Yeah, I've done lots of really interesting things with lightning, but yeah, there's definitely loads of ways. I mean, it's about creating lines basically from, connecting, maybe depends what sort of lighting it is, but if it's just like two emitters connecting lines between and then adding noise and, maybe little bits that are kind of sparking off and making other connections, you can kind of, once you get the main thing set up, then you can sort of create like a recursive type effect where that thing that you did for the main bolt can be applied to little offshoots, and yeah, all sorts of interesting things you can do with lightning. It can start off as particle based, so you can use points to create those initial points, and then use add nodes to connect points together. Yeah, loads of cool stuff. Next week, let's do lightning. So there we go. It's not looking too bad. That drag actually has kind of helped. It's maybe a little strong, but it's created a lot more sort of variance in the way that these are falling and given us, some quite nice streams. So yeah, I don't mind that. Probably needs a little tweaking. Now, because I've only got half an hour left, I'm gonna just for you, John, and anyone else that's interested, I'm going to move on to the pyro component. So let's have a look at our debris source here. So we've got that, we've got our velocity. So yeah, maybe at this point here, we may choose a different age to kill these on. So maybe with the pyro, it might live a little longer. Yeah, the drag did work pretty well. That random really helps, you know, just adding those different values to each particle really help. So let's run this into pyro. So I'm going to just first of all create an attribute wrangle, and I'm just going to say at density equals 1. That's it. That's all we need before we go into a volume rasterize attributes and rasterize density into a volume. There we go. It's ginormous. So I'll take the particle scale down. It's a little hard to see, but I can just see it there. Set my background to dark. There it is there. So take that down a little more. Voxel size, we know needs to be pretty low because of our scale. So there we go. So there's our source. That's kind of all we need. We do have velocity as well, so we will put that on there. Rasterize V. And you can see now I can actually blur my source as well, which is cool, using that velocity attribute. I think actually I don't need that rasterize to do that necessarily. But yeah, I can actually smear those points based on their velocity that they're traveling. So that can be really handy when you have a moving, trailing source. So yeah, you can see that. So I will rasterize V though, because that's going to be important for our sim. That is it. That's all I need to get going. So out density and .NET, another one. So we're going to end up with a lot of .NETs in this setup. Plug it into the first input, and let's just have a look when these particles start, because I'll set that to my first frame. Don't want to waste frames here. So I think looks like we've got a little bit there, but I'll start it at 30. Simulation start frame 30. All right, smoke object, pyro solver, and volume source. Oops, wrong one. Volume source. I swear this tab menu has become more sensitive in 18.5. I seem to always put down the wrong nodes now. Just going to set my scale. It's quite a small scale thing, so it's kind of easy to set a max bounding box. Half the center, we'll put that right on the ground, or half the Y value in the center, I should say. We'll put that right in the ground. You can always link these up too. Copy, paste, relative reference, divide by 2. That way, if I change this, you can see it always just resizes it to be on the ground, which is cool. So I think probably 3 by 3 by 3 might be enough. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, first context. Volumes, operations, add. I'll add V into vel first, that's our velocity. Add another one, and density into density. Let's set our voxel resolution down to 0.01. Hopefully that won't be too crazy slow. Gas resize fluid dynamic, that's important. We don't want to solve this whole box if we don't have to, so this is going to just resize it around the area that's important. But sometimes, if you don't have any source on the first frame, this can resize down to 0, but it looks like it has captured something there. So let's just, on our pyro solver, turn off combustion. We're not using that. Shaping, dissipation, set to 0.01. Don't want it to be super crazy high. Like last week, I talked about that. Dissipation, so I always set that very low to start with. And there we go. Getting some stuff happening. Now, I find with dust, a lot of disturbance is a good thing. Breaks it up, gets it very fuzzy. Quite often, dust sort of disperses, quite quickly. So I'm going to go to my shaping, turn on my disturbance, and we've got field to disturb velocity. That's good. Block size 0.2 is very large for this scale, so I'm going to put that down to 0.01. Control field just going to do it based on density. And I'm just going to basically apply it to everywhere except the 0 density. So, you know, it doesn't just put disturbance all across the bounding box. It's just going to be where the density is, but you can see it's already doing it. It's making it very kind of broken up. It may be a little strong, my disturbance, but you know, just to sort of make sure that it's working, I crank it up so that I can see something. We've got very fine kind of source, very fine kind of stuff emitting. So I'm going to come out, dop import fields, .net, just copy that, paste / smoke object, presets to pyro or smoke, whichever one. I don't have CD, I don't have fuel, I don't have heat, I don't have temperature, I don't have rest, I don't have rest. I've just got vel and density. And I'm going to put a volume visualizer down as well to help sort of work out, you know, what I'm doing with this in terms of shading. Density, crank that up, there we go. We can also on here compute min-max values, so that will allow us in the geometry spreadsheet to have a look here. There's our max density 3, so our density is 3.16. So we could, if we wanted to in here, at the moment it's clamping at 1, so we could put it to 3 if we wanted that to be the true kind of representation. But usually, you know, with dust, you kind of want to clamp it so it sort of all shows up relatively the same. So it's a very kind of flat, uniform sort of thing. Dust tends not to be super dense. So, yeah, it's kind of better if it's a bit flatter. So let's merge that back over with everything else. Have a look at our results. So there's our dust there. It's a little hard to see. Let me just change the color. I'm going to have to put a field in there. Density. Get rid of that black. I do use it. I haven't had much cause to use it at the moment. I was kind of checking it out a little bit before David when I was assessing attributes up here and I was setting some active attributes on the .net. Absolutely, it's something that you should use because it really gives a good understanding of the data that you're playing with. But you know, I only use it when I need to. It's not, I don't have it up all the time like some people work in the technical view where they have it up constantly. But yeah, I mean, it is a really important thing to start to understand because it really shows you what you're working with. And just like I, you know, went quickly and checked out my density value before knowing that, you know, there's no way for me to see here what my density value is or what my velocities are or what my temperature is. So when you get to shading as well, it's really important to kind of understand what you're working with. And the only way that you can do it is, you know, kind of just coming, or the easiest way that you can do it is coming here and just learning. Yeah, look, I mean, for me, it took me, because I had taught myself and, you know, I just sort of picked and choose from various different tutorials. Yeah, you know, I didn't understand it for a long time. And it was sort of, you know, mystified me, this just collection of numbers. And I just sort of glazed over every time I looked at it. But it is actually really important. And yeah, like you say, John, I have conditioned you to troubleshoot with it because it is the easiest way to kind of just see what's going on. Like if I went in here and like my density wasn't showing up here and I went in here and it said 0, I'd be like, oh, well, obviously something's gone wrong. Then I know, you know, I can start. So I always use it to diagnose problems or to at least see what values are that I might need to kind of go back and change, or if I'm setting up shaders or things like that, then, you know, it is incredibly important. But it's not something that I use, you know, all the time. It's just, you know, when I need to. And yeah, I love to visualize stuff as well in the viewport. It makes sometimes more sense to me to visualize something either as a color or as numbers on the viewport rather than in the spreadsheet, because the spreadsheet is completely disconnected from the interface and the 3D kind of experience. It's just numbers. The more you understand it, the more you can kind of make those connections without having the viewport there. But yeah, for me, markers, are a great thing to be able to see directly, okay, so what is that age value, for instance, on these? If I have a look at these back here and create a marker for age, it'll show me those age values on the points themselves, so I can actually see what age they are at what particular time. So that is kind of sometimes more useful than looking at them in the geometry spreadsheet, because looking at the spreadsheet, I don't know, necessarily what point this is here, and I want to know what age it is. So creating a marker is a really good way to find that out. It's a combination. It's just a combination of things. You just need to, I guess, use what works for you. Some people, some people would just have the geometry spreadsheet open all the time. Some people use markers. Some people use more, markers than I do. But yeah, I think getting to that point where you really understand the data that you're creating, that is a really kind of good place to be with Houdini, because there's just so much understanding, and it's not so much just kind of shooting fish in a barrel or working in the dark. You can see what you're doing, and if you make a change and it doesn't work, you kind of know maybe why, because those values have been set to 0, or it's a really good diagnostic tool. And like I've said in the past, it's all about problem solving, Houdini. So having all these tools at your disposal to try and figure out what has gone wrong, or maybe there's something in your code that you've done wrong, or it's just really, really handy to have all that, all that kind of stuff. But you'll get there. I mean, but it is certainly important. So don't I avoided it for a long time, and like I've told some people in the past that I was kind of using Houdini professionally, on films, and I didn't really understand half of how it worked. It didn't stop me from producing stuff, but it was kind of, there were still quite a few elements to it that mystified me. And that's, like John says, that's kind of what I try to teach it, in my classes. It's just, let's just visualize, let's work out what is going on. Let's work through the steps and trying to figure out, where we need to make an adjustment, or what our values are, so we even know where to start. It is really, really important. So there we go. I mean, that's a pretty quick and dirty dust sim, but they don't need to be much more complicated than that. There's some cool little trail stuff happening here. The disturbance is probably a little much. In fact, if I put a light on, we'll be able to see this a little better. So I'll just go and crank a little spotlight in there. There we go. Look at that. So we can see the modeling of those volume shapes a little better. And again, after this point here, DOP import before the volume visualizer, because I might want to tweak that file cache node. So I'd cache that to disk, and then we can just see kind of what we're dealing with there. So I might just go back in and tweak that a little bit. Maybe just pull that down across a little bit. Take that down 0.5. Yeah, I think we don't need to go crazy with it. Yeah, I think the more you kind of use it and become familiar with it and see people use it, the more it will sink in. It's just practice with Houdini. The more you use it, the more you learn from other people, the better you'll be. I think certainly having done quite a lot of work in it now over the years, there's just you come across the same issues time and time again, and every time you do, you're practiced in kind of overcoming them. So it becomes way easier to kind of work out why things might not be working or what you need to do next. Obviously, you know, I've done this kind of RBD into particles into pyro so often that it's just like, yeah, I know kind of the flow of what's going to happen, and I kind of know where there's going to be problems potentially, or where if errors pop up, I know where to check, like that velocity issue. You know, things like that. It's very easy to miss a step or forget something. So it's just practice. And even if you do mess something up, you kind of know how to solve it fairly easily. I just turned on the closed boundaries as well, so that's going to give us a sort of pseudo ground collision. I think I might have mentioned this in the past as well, that it's not necessarily the best type of ground collision, but for a quick ground collision, it's not too bad. I find that you can't really get sort of sticky behavior to the ground with this method, whereas using a ground plane is a little better for that. But yeah, it's kind of fine for a lot of things. There we go. So that's a little bit less disturbed. So hopefully, John, that gives you some interesting ideas. I don't know what's going on back here. Bit of a backfire happening. Yikes. That's embarrassing. This one's kind of cool though. A little cool trail up. I'm not sure what's going on there. It must have bounced down or did it pop off or something? Sorry, you might be able to hear my boy out there. Must be lunchtime. So yeah, look, I think, this is a really good start. There's obviously a lot more that we can do with this, and I think maybe next week. Yeah, that's right, John. Maybe next week I'll keep going on with it as well, and as well as showing you guys some lightning stuff. I don't know if we can incorporate lightning into this. Might be a bit weird, but I might, because it's hard to do the really high res stuff on the streams, I might go through and run a couple of high res sims on this, and we can take a look at those next week as well. I think there could certainly be some really cool things that happen if we up the resolution of the fracture, up the resolution of the dust, get those points, working a little better. I think we can do some work there to improve that stuff. So let's just finish off the stream by doing a little flipbook here. Let's see. There we go. So this hopefully will just run through and cook out everything that we kind of need. It's going to be a bit weird while it's overriding the white stuff, but yeah. So I think it's not a bad little setup. I think the one thing that I'd like to sort of improve is maybe the junction between the stucco and the Buddha, so it's a bit more seamless. But there may be something that we can do there, where bursts of it behind a character for drama. Yeah. Lightning is... Oh, sorry. Yeah, let me read back. Lightning is storm lighting. Oh, cool. Couple of bursts behind a character for drama. I can show you something interesting I did with clouds, actually, David, where... I don't know if you have storm clouds, but you can do these really kind of cool lighting tricks with clouds where, you just basically render it with a bunch of different lights, and then in comp you can up those lights up and down. And I don't know, I assume maybe you're doing this in Unreal. I think it was Unreal, wasn't it? So maybe, there's something that you could do with that there. But yeah, there's some really cool stuff you can do with lightning and lighting of clouds or environments even. Maybe not clouds, but just environments. You can do some really cool stuff with that. But yeah, you can totally, like a quickly gathering cloud grouping with a couple of bursts of lightning. Yeah. So I guess not necessarily the clouds. When I did it, I already just had the cloud model, and I'd be showing, just lightning inside that. But yeah, I'll show you some things. I'll show you some cool lightning stuff. There's lots of cool things that you can do. What was I going to say? Lightning geometry as well. You know, can definitely do some really cool things with that. And yeah, it doesn't. There's obviously really complex methods, and there's very simple methods. And as you know, that's just me. I like the simpler stuff because it's easier to control and it's faster to do. I hate waiting around for things or things that just are fiddly to kind of set up and tweak. So yeah, I always favor those simple things. But yeah, we can take a look at that stuff next week and see, you know, I can see what I can kind of come up with. So here we go. You know, it's still kind of flipbooking out, but we can start to see now all of these secondary things. And the dust is a little much, to be honest. I mean, I've cranked that up, that density up pretty high, just so I can see it. So definitely we can turn that density down. It's a little bit kind of billowy. If you remember, I also kind of changed the age that I was emitting off those debris particles. So perhaps they're emitting a little long. So that, you know, this one, for instance, that kind of bounces down and creates a trail as it goes is probably a little bit too over the top. Can the points from debris node come from the edges of pieces? Yeah, absolutely. That is actually what it's doing, John. Yeah, cool. Great. Try it out. I mean, you could try this kind of setup out on any model, really. Any model, you could basically just create a shell using a peak or a poly extrude node on a sphere and have that outer shell crack off. And, you know, even any RBD sim, this will work with this debris setup node, the debris source node you can use to, you know, just create stuff coming off, you know, off any fracturing node. So, John, yeah, the debris source, it does attach those points to the edges only. There is actually a setting to turn it on for the entire surface as well. But usually you do just want it to generate points on the edges of where those things are cracking. So that is what it does. So you can change it, and I didn't really go through, you know, the settings of it, but there's a number for points on the edges and a number for points on the surface, and you can increase those or decrease those. Yeah, totally. You could instance a sprite onto those, or you could generate a particle system that you could output into Unreal, and then do sprite clouds or something on them. I'm sure you could come up with a whole bunch of interesting things to do, you know, in real time. I have seen those methods for getting, you know, proper pyro sims in. I think it's called vertex animation, but it's really not my field. But on the side effects website, under the game, like if you look under the various industries, under the game industry, there's a video on there about vertex animation, and it shows like liquid sims and pyro sims and other kind of complex things being rendered in real time, which is quite interesting. So that could be something to look at if you're not aware of that. So there we go. It's a bit dusty. You can see it's kind of making it, you know, this camera angle makes it feel small as well because we're kind of looking down. But you can imagine if you were sort of on the ground looking up at this thing, it would feel kind of a lot larger scale, like this huge thing sort of crumbling and collapsing a little bit. So I hope Brian's not too shocked by the level of collapsing that I've done to this guy, but it is just the stucco. Don't worry, he's going to be there at the end when the dust clears. Maybe he'll be a gold shimmering idol inside. It would be funny if it was like some other religion underneath. I won't go there, but that would be kind of that would be kind of funny. So it's like Jesus underneath. Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit kind of epic at the moment. Bit too pyroclastic with the pyro, I think. But I did sort of supercharge that density there, so you know, cranked it up to 100. So it's definitely too strong. Also, you know, crushing this down as well, that's going to make it more sort of full and pyroclastic feeling. So playing with those minimum maximum values. All right, I gotta run, but thank you everybody for joining me again. I hope it's been valuable. Hope it's been interesting. If you do have any kind of look, it's cracking there. If you do have any kind of things that you'd like me to talk about, or any questions, feel free to ask them at any time. But feel free to comment on the videos as well. Be sure to like and subscribe so you catch a stream every week, and I'll see you guys next week for some more fun and games in Houdini. Thanks guys, thanks for joining me. See you next week.